Welcome to Blood Flow, where creativity meets science. I'm Jonathan Hamill, a doctor specialized in blood circulation and a novelist from Paris. On this podcast, through conversations with world-class experts in the domains of science and art, we will explore the hidden links between the pulse of life and the rhythm of creativity. My guest today is Denise Hamilton. Denise is an author, keynote speaker, and inclusion strategist. In her work, Denise uses her 25 years of experience with Fortune 500 organizations like AOL and CBRE to provide solutions that support employees and the bottom line. Some of the companies that have trusted her to analyze and solve difficult problems include household names like Meta, Amazon, Shell, and the WNBA. A few years ago, Denise decided to write a book using the knowledge she'd found in her work as a nationally recognized DEI expert. That's diversity, equity, and inclusion. The result is her book, Indivisible, How to Forge Our Differences into a Stronger Future, which will be available everywhere on February 6th. It has been described by Professor Adam Grant, bestselling author of Think Again and Originals, as an extremely powerful and surprisingly practical read. You can find all things Denise on her website, denisehamilton.co. Denise, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here with you.
Okay, so first of all, can you define the word indivisible and how it will be used in the context of your book and this discussion?
Yes, it's my favorite thing to do. It's a word that we all learned in the United States. Every child had to say the Pledge of Allegiance, right? And it's a word that we've all heard, but we don't really know what it means. And for my purposes, what I think it means is just having the ability to see the value, beauty, and strength of every single person, and creating a space that they can all contribute in a way that is significant, where there are no artificial barriers, whether intentional or unintentional, to them maximizing their full potential. That to me is an indivisible culture. And I think if you can figure out how to be indivisible, you can be indestructible. The best metaphor that I would give for indivisible is the human body. The heart and the lungs, they don't argue. Which one is important? They both know that they're important, right? And the legs, the muscles in your legs are the strongest in your body, the strongest muscle group in your body. And they can take you anywhere, all over the world. But you are going absolutely nowhere if the tiny little bones in your ear don't manage your balance, right? So this idea that it's about size or position, it really isn't. It's all important. It's all valuable.
Interconnectedness.
Yes.
Yes. So I read your book. It's very fascinating. So we're gonna dig into many subjects.
Thank you.
I want to start with giving up our stories. That's a big part of the beginning of the book. So we've all grown up with our stories, either fairy tales, with the shows we watch on television, even what made it to the evening news and how it was discussed in our homes. So this shapes our view of the world, and of course, everyone needs a view of the world. But what you write is, if we want to become indivisible, we need to be able to challenge these beloved stories with facts. So when did you first understand this need to give up on our stories? Is there a particular moment that comes to mind where you thought about this?
Yeah, I've been in executive leadership for quite some time. I'm always have to tell people I'm a lot older than I look. And I could hear, especially working with other executive women, I could hear stories that they had in their heads about what was possible, about who's going to get the job, and can I be a leader if I have a child? What happens if I, take an international assignment? Will I ever get married, or will I ever, there are all these stories that were bouncing around in their heads. And it really occurred to me, my goodness, your stories, your actual belief systems, they can really inhibit progress. And I started to extrapolate that across the whole world. We all have our stories, and some of them are broken, some of them are incomplete, and some of them are outright lies. And so how do you detach yourself from them? Because just because you love that story doesn't mean it's true, right? And so a lot of us are deeply attached to ideas that are not accurate. I always tell people I have a shrine in my office, and in it I have a little bobblehead of Barack Obama, little bobblehead. And I keep it there because I want to remind myself that when I heard that he had announced that he was running for president, I laughed out loud. I thought it was ridiculous. I thought there would never be a Black president in my lifetime. And I was 100% wrong. Not once, but twice. I was wrong. So I have to remind myself, never let the disappointments of yesterday rob you of the promise and possibility of tomorrow, right? And that means putting down a story of what can happen, what the realities are, what the limitations are. If you can hold on to those old broken ideas, or you can find some new ones and you can leap forward.
Yeah, so you mentioned broken stories and lies. So I want to dig into broken stories. First of all, you mentioned in the book the Slave's Bible, and that's one example of modified truth. Can you tell us a little bit more about this story, which I didn't know about?
Yeah, there is a Bible created specifically for the slaves. And I like, that's kind of breathtaking, right? The
Yeah,
idea
I had
that
no idea.
you have this belief system that this book, the Bible, is the inspired word of God. You are going all over the world converting people because this is the right book. But not for those people. They literally took out verses about humane treatment, salary, compensation for work. Like they literally stripped all of those verses out. And that was the Bible that was used on plantations to manage the slave populations because they didn't want to actually honor the word of God. They wanted to use it, the verses and the sections that would support subjugation as opposed to the truth, the full work. And I think that's really insidious, first of all, but it's a powerful testament to how far people are willing to go to change the story to manipulate you. And we see this on social media today. It's not such a strange idea. People will take out the part of the testimony, or they'll pull out the section of the speech so that you only hear what they want you to hear. And that's going to require all of us to be more digitally literate and more sensitive to the information that we are given.
Sure. So do you think this was also the case when we were thinking about fairy tales? Do you think these stories were done intentionally with something else in mind?
I do.
You can't
I
really
think
know.
that I think it's a mixture of both. I think sometimes some of them are just a reflection of the times, right? And then some of them were done to maintain the status quo, right? To keep us locked in. I don't know. I have the most enlightened, amazing women in my life. They all still want to look like a princess on their wedding day, right? Like it doesn't matter because our stories don't give us up easily. And those stories don't change, right? So it's really interesting to think about the stories you have in your head that tell you what you can do and what you can be. I mean, think about how many just Disney stories were literally of women waiting. Rapunzel waiting in the tower for somebody to save her. It was her hair that got them in and out of the tower, but she's still waiting for somebody to come and save her. Sleeping Beauty laying in the woods, waiting for someone to save her. Like these concepts are still living in our heads, and we have to be super intentional about purging them and allowing a different reality.
Do you feel like the modern Disney cartoons are, exactly more modern when it comes to women?
I think they're trying, and it's always funny to me to hear the resistance to the effort, right? Because it reminds you how deeply connected and invested people are in the status quo. Deeply invested. Sometimes I was listening to the controversy over the Little Mermaid being Black in the live action, and people are saying Ariel was not Black, Ariel's white, and I want to say Ariel's a mermaid. she's not a real person. Like, she's not a person, you guys. Like, it's not real. But that's it. Like, we really love our stories.
So once someone knows this, how does it translate to everyday life? Because even people who know that to be careful about what they believe, they end up having their own trusted sources of information. So how, on a personal level, do you choose what source of information you decide to trust? And do you have a method for this?
I do. I do. I try to find actual source material whenever I can. If I see a meme or some kind of post on social media, I don't just share it. Try to go back to the speech or go back to the document that was actually released and read it for myself. And I have to say, this is no easy task, right? We are in an incredibly challenging time as it relates to information. There are people who, quite frankly, grow wealthy on our outrage, on rage farming, us as a population, and they're deeply invested in us misunderstanding each other, right? So you do have to work harder than you should have to work to
Yeah,
get to the core of good information. But you're going to have to do that. Think twice before you share. If there's one thing I can say, is slow down, look at it, and be careful of like what you're consuming. Make sure you're not in an echo chamber. Are you listening to different sources from different countries, from different political parties? Like, what's the full story? I think you have to cultivate a posture of being a truth seeker. I think there's two kinds of people. There's people that are keepers of the story, and there are people that are truth seekers. And you got to work really hard to be a truth seeker. But I think if we don't do that, we we are not even in the same conversation. We're not talking about facts. We're literally talking about, it's the most meta communication you could ever have. We're talking about facts on top of stories, on top of lies, mixed with facts. Like, it's not a real
yeah,
conversation. So we have to work really hard to
yeah.
be thorough consumers of
Yeah,
information.
and it will also slow down the conversation if more people do this, because now it's just share, like, share, and then, nothing matters.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we also mentioned, and this is the conversation, lies and misbelief. So you explained there are many reasons why lies spread so easily, either intentionally or not. They're seductive, they're easy to spread, even now more than ever, and lies beget more lies. So, in your opinion, what are, well, you touched on it, but what are some of the other ways that we can protect ourselves from lies or incomplete stories?
Yeah, I think again, I'll say, like, be clear on the motive. Where is your information coming from? Right? Are they trying to rage farm you? Are you the product? Right? Make sure that you are clear on where the information is even coming from. And then I would also say, be an actual student. I think that we are relying on social media to tell us what we think, sometimes to feed us the pieces of the information. This information exists in the real world, in real life, and push yourself to do the research. Somebody sent me a really alarming post yesterday. This just happened.
Mm.
And I said, let me go back and see. A governor had released a statement about something that their state was doing. I said, let me go back, and it's on their website. This is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. And it wasn't exactly as the post suggested, right? And I thought about that. Just that moment of investigation stops me from going on social media to do some rant about this thing that happened. Like, it's going, I promise you, I know in a world that goes a million miles a minute, it's very hard to slow down. But if we don't slow down, the cost is just immeasurable.
Yeah, it's kind of a scientific approach in a way. Like in my job, if someone tells me, this happened to me and this doctor misdiagnosed me, either I can believe it or I can, take a minute to read the file. Maybe,
Yeah.
it's not exactly what happened. So if you find something like this, is it easy for you to tell the person that they were wrong, either intentionally or not? Is it easy for you to convince people that you've understood that something was not exactly correct? How is the usual response to this?
I think that one thing I work extraordinarily hard at, this is very, very important to me, is to move with empathy when I am advising someone that they have a understanding that is incorrect, right? I think that we need to put ourselves, we're all walking around with some story in our head that's not true, or some, bastardization of what happened. We all are. So I try to extend the grace to other people that I want extended to me, right? I had somebody call me once. I used the term Eskimo in a speech, and somebody called me and said, they actually don't like that term to be used. They use the term Inuit, like you shouldn't, they actually think of that as a slur. Done. Corrected. That word's gone. Inuit it is. It's a posture of being open to correction and being kind when you're delivering correction, right? Because my goal is not to win. My goal is not to beat you or to embarrass you or to humiliate you. My goal is that we can work better to find solutions, and we can't find solutions if we have different fact patterns, right? So if your goal is pure, I find it is much easier to communicate across difference.
Yeah, it's like you're taking people along for the ride and not beating them down as you go.
Yeah, I've never seen anyone be convinced through humiliation. I've never seen
That's
that.
correct.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, language, you just touched upon it. It's also very important. Both defines and confines us. And I think you're right. There's no greater power than the power to name a thing. And that's really very true. So concerning the words we use, how important is it to be able to change and evolve with the times, keeping in mind who and what we are referring to? These with all these new ways of, as you said, Inuit instead of it's Eskimo, and with all these new words going around.
Yeah, I always find this conversation really funny when people are like, I can't keep it straight. I mean, is it LGBTQ or LGBTQIA plus, or is it Black, or is it African American? Is it Latin or Latinx? Or I just can't manage it. But those same people have no problem with NFT, Bitcoin, social media manager. All these words did not exist 10 years ago. 10 years ago, these words did not exist. And we have easily incorporated them into our vocabulary. Why? Because we have an interest in being understood and in understanding in those spaces. And so I just think we have to be very careful about our language, and we have to allow it to evolve. It's going to change. Language has always changed. The simplest example, those of you that remember Michael Jackson, he said, not bad meaning bad, but bad meaning good, right? And when he's saying the song, I'm bad, like words change, meaning changes. And so we have to be nimble and responsive to that. We also have to be careful about people who are committed to manipulating words and changing their meaning and misrepresenting the meaning. If I can't beat your idea, I'm going to beat your language. I'm going to confound it so people can't understand each other when they're talking, right? And so you have to be sensitive to that strategy as well.
What are you thinking about politics, for example, when you
Oh,
talk
yeah.
about this?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, can you give, because you've worked with many companies, a real life example of what a company would win or lose by staying open to a new vocabulary, or on the contrary, being closed to it?
Yeah, I think I work with a lot of oil and gas companies, energy companies, and there's a job title called the landman. And that person negotiates deals for land for oil leases, and that's their job. And I remember the first time I met a female landman, and I kind of thought it was so interesting that they haven't changed the terminology, and we hope that they will at some point. But think about the significance of going from fireman to firefighter, or policeman to police officer, how you open up the space and you make it more welcoming for everyone to participate, right? So I think this idea of releasing the limits of language, and you'll appreciate this story as a scientist. I was listening to astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he was talking about how language sometimes actually limits our scientific understanding, because as laymen, we see, there's another word, layman, but as laymen, we see an observable reality and we name it with us as the center, right? But we're not the center. So the example you used was the tide going in and out, right? Where the tide doesn't go in and out, the earth actually goes in and out, right? But think if you're doing a scientific study or a scientific experiment based on faulty language, you're going to get the wrong answer every single time, right? And in the book, I extend this concept to the idea of sunset, right? The sun doesn't set. We all know it's the earth that sets. But what if you and I went on an international campaign to change the term from sunset to earthset? Jonathan, I don't think we'd get very far. I don't. And it's really important. This is very, very important. It wouldn't matter if it was right.
People are attached to it.
People are attached to it. So think about how, if that's true of something this harmless, think about all of the things that people are deeply attached to, and it's hard for them to release. So language is a key place where we keep things rigid and we don't let it move. So that's why we have this like culture war over language.
So what are some of the solutions to this? Except, first of all, talking about it, for sure it helps. What other solutions are there? Do you think it's just going to be a slow process, whatever happens?
I do think it's a slow process. And sometimes we didn't pack a lunch for the trip. We're not ready for how long and how difficult these things are. And I think that is important to budget for the challenge associated with any objective that you're going into, right? I think that's really important. But I also think like what I try to do in my business is I really try to simplify my language. I try to make sure we're all talking about the same thing. Before we start talking, let's define our terms, like, high school debate club. You got to define the terms first before you start arguing. I think that's really, really important, because I do think people have different understandings of different terminology and they end up just talking past each other, not understanding.
Yeah. So I want to go back a little and come back to language. So what did you study, and at what point did you decide to become a DEI expert?
Well, I actually evolved into a DEI expert, and DEI is only one part of what I do. I really am a change management expert. I really focus on the people side of change. That's what I do. So whether that's AI, whether it's remote work, whether it's diversity, equity, and inclusion, that all kind of falls in my purview. I'm really obsessed with how are these changes going to impact people. And I have a bachelor's in social work, a master's in communication. So I have like the soft and the kind of hard business skill, and marry that. And then 25 years of executive experience. Like I said, I'm a little older than I look. And so I've seen these things in real life. So I didn't start doing this work until I had done years and years of leadership of people. I've been the only woman or the only African American in almost every job I've ever had. So how do you navigate these spaces? How can you be successful in these spaces? People started asking me for those skill set tips, and I started giving them. And, this led to that, led to that, led to that. And here we are today, writing a book called Indivisible.
And as you were a consultant for these companies, I'm guessing that, as you said, sometimes you had to talk to the CEOs and tell them where they got it wrong. Were there any teachers and mentors to teach you how to navigate these conversations, or is it just something you had to learn by yourself?
Oh, I think there's so many really talented, incredible communicators amongst us. They're softer. I got some famous ones like a Adam Grant or a Kat Cole, like, that are really popular and known by a lot of people. But I also have a lot of quiet people who have just been incredible leaders. I've just been able to observe them with a gentle, powerful leadership. I think that we underestimate the skill of influence, right? We really know how to push people and bully people and direct people and, that piece of it. But the skill of influence is such a powerful capability. And so I've been blessed to be around so many leaders who showed me how to do it and how to not do it.
Mm.
Both
Equally
examples,
important.
equally important.
And you mentioned now that you were also teaching and mentoring younger communicators. How did that start? Is that just people coming to you to ask for advice? And what is it? What have you learned by teaching others?
Oh gosh, influencing others is always a learning experiment. It's always a beautiful exchange because I think I'm still unpacking my stories, right? My ideas of this is how it has to be, or, there's so many concepts I didn't grow up with. And I have to open up my mind of like what's possible. I was talking to a group the other day about college and they were saying, I just don't have to go. And everything in my 53-year-old body was screaming, you have to go to college. What do you mean? And I had to stop and I just tried to listen to them. Listen, like, I don't want to be in debt. I don't want my skill set. I can do my job with it. Look at all these people graduating that AI is going to replace their jobs entirely. They went to college and it's not about to matter. Like they gave really cogent arguments. And in my stomach is churning because everything that's been drilled in my head is you have to go to college. And so I think that like respectful exchange with people from different perspectives, generations, ethnicities, genders, parts of the country, parts of the world, it all enriches us. It makes us better. It makes us smarter. So I'd love to be in those conversations.
Yeah, I was wondering after all these years, what were the most surprising cases you've been asked to work on? Because in the book you mentioned some things like people love to touch pregnant women's bellies, or single men are disrespected by people at the workplace with children, which was really
Mhm.
surprising to me. Can you share one or two stories like this? Because I'm not sure people know these things. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think that there very often, unfortunately, this work gets reduced to black white issues. Like it's all about black white, and it's really not. It's literally about removing barriers, unnecessary barriers, and addressing sometimes toxic behavior. Like you're not as far along on your journey as you need to be, and you're impacting other people. You become a barrier to other people. And so those are the things that I get called in very often to talk about. There's so many stories. I was called in. I've been working with a company for a few months, and the leader, one of the leaders, not the CEO, but somebody in the leadership team called me and said, "Hey, can I ask you a question? I gotta run something by you." Absolutely. What do you got? We have a high performer that we want to promote, but we're having a little bit of an issue. And it's, oh, tell me what the issue is. Because of Me Too, he does not want to manage women. He doesn't want to have meals with them or have women in his office. He doesn't want to, have any outside communication with that. Like he just doesn't want to mentor or lead women. And we were wondering what you thought about that. And I got really quiet and I said, "What do you think about that?" Like, what do you think about that? Or I don't, it doesn't feel right. I said, let me reflect back to you what I hear you saying. You have a new person that is applying for a job that is telling you on the job interview, he refuses to do half of the job, but you're actually contemplating hiring him. And then she laughed and she said, when you say it like that, it's ridiculous. I'm so sorry I called you. And I said, no, don't be sorry. Because sometimes you need a thought partner. And to listeners, I want to urge them, find a thought partner that can reflect back to you or challenge your assumptions. Or these conversations are sticky, they're convoluted, they can have very big business implications. It's hard. It's not always easy to do the right thing. And so it's really important to find thought partners that you can bounce these ideas off of and come to some solution that everyone can feel satisfied, But I was really blown away by how they had the courage to reach out, right? So people say, I can't believe you work with them and they still ask you something like that. I don't look at it like that. I'm really glad that they asked the question. They knew that something about this was not going to work. They knew something about this wasn't right. And rather than just do it anyway, they stopped and said, let me tap a resource. Everybody needs to learn how to tap a resource to help navigate all of these challenging situations.
Yeah, I think that's the basis of the work as a consultant. That as you have a fresh eye. I mean,
Yeah.
my brother does this also. He goes into I was like, I don't understand what you do. He analyzes the companies and then he goes in, does a workshop for them to teach them all to work together. Uh, I was saying, don't they know this? But actually, no, I understand. He has a different perspective of the whole thing. He
Right.
sees things that they don't do. So yeah, same sort of thing. Not on diversity, but consulting.
Yeah. Same thing.
Yeah. So there's also a very interesting chapter on giving. Particularly when you mention giving to charity, you write that we need to be thoughtful about how we give by making sure that we allow for the dignity and the humanity of those we're trying to assist. Can you give an example of how someone may think he's doing something good, but ends up mainly serving himself with little or no regard for the person he's trying to help?
Oh, I have so many examples. I think that we have been socialized that whatever we give is good enough. And I have a categorical no to that. No, like it's not good enough. You need to give thoughtfully. I live in Houston, Texas, and we went through Hurricane Harvey that flooded out thousands of people. I remember going down to the George R. Brown Convention Center to volunteer. I wasn't flooded, but thousands of my neighboring Houstonians were, and they had lost everything. And I was stunned to see what people donated. Some people came and they donated clothes and food, and it was amazing. Other people brought bathing suits. They brought graduation gowns. It was just utterly
Bathing suits.
ridiculous. Can you imagine in the middle of a flood? And what they did was they brought their trash. They just pulled out their trash instead of going into the linen closet and reaching and getting a good blanket. They went to the bottom of not the top. They went to the bottom and got the one with the stains and the holes. And that's what they chose to donate. So literally, I watched this enterprise of providing support to hurricane victims. They had to allocate resources to sort the trash. So not only did you not help, you hurt because you took resources away from actually helping people. Somebody had to manage your garbage, right? So I think this idea of just giving whatever, I want to get rid of that. I want that to be gone, right? I think it's really important that we're thoughtful and intentional. And we saw this happen too at the Sandy Hook massacre. All those beautiful children were murdered so brutally, and people sent teddy bears. And it's like, what was that for? Was that for them or was that for you? So you felt better. So they got a total of 67,000 teddy bears. So now it's someone's job to take care of the teddy bears. What?
Yeah.
Who did that help? How did that help? Right. So I think it's like we need to be more thoughtful about the resources that we've been given and how we deploy those resources. You're going to donate to the food bank. Don't get the expired gourmet olives you got in the fruit basket 3 years ago that you didn't want to eat, and donate food that people want to eat. Donate, or better yet, just donate the cash so they can buy the food at a much higher, much easier cost so that they can serve those populations. But very often we make helping more about us than we make it about the recipient.
Yeah, I think that's really correct. So what are some of the questions you should ask yourself? Is the main question, who am I helping by doing this? I mean, it's
Yes.
a tough question to ask when you're
Yeah.
actually giving.
And I
But
think it's like, what's the problem? right? What is the problem? We have a very strange habit of using our understanding of the problem or lack of understanding of the problem to drive what we do. So, for example, I want to, the homeless, they need to get themselves together. Unless they're homeless vets, I would help a homeless vet. How do you know why a homeless vet is homeless? You assume because you think vets have this experience, and so I need to be more compassionate. Why aren't you compassionate to anyone that is unhoused? Why do you think your understanding of the situation calibrates how you help and when you help and who you help? Why can't you just help? So first, like, what's the problem I'm solving? My husband and I do an annual toy giveaway, and we do it differently than I've ever seen it done. Both of us actually grew up very poor. And one of the things that happens when you're a poor child is people judge your parents, right? Your parents, they don't care. They don't love you as much as rich people. Like it's a weird energy. And so one of the things we do is we give in a way that diminishes poor people. So let's take Christmas. What do? We buy some cheap toys from the cheap dollar store, wrap it up, put it in a basket, and then somebody comes in dressed as Santa and they go and they pass out. Oh, you're a boy, you get a truck. Or you're a girl, you get a Barbie doll. Like that's what we do, right? Yeah, it's just it's soulless. And so what we did is we flipped it, and we went and bought hundreds of toys, big boxes, right? Because on Christmas, don't you want a big box? One of the rules is you cannot buy a toy you wouldn't give to your child. And it's magic kits and science project kits and sports and musical instruments. And it's because kids have all kinds of interests, and their mother and their father, their parents come in and they pick the toys for their child. We help them wrap it, and then they give it to their child. I don't need to be a hero in your child's life. I need to support you being a hero in your child's life. That's a perfect example of centering the problem and the solution versus centering yourself. Stop making yourself the star of every story. Support the people. You really want to help poor children? Help their parents.
Yeah, and I think you're also right. At some point when you were part of a group that was going on a trip to help people somewhere very far, and you were like, why don't we help this person who's on the street, right?
Like you drive past poor people to get to the airport so you can go help those poor people over there. And I'm like, what's wrong with these people? They look like they need some help right here. But that's what we do. We make it's like poverty tourism. And it's weird. Like there's people around you that need help. I was talking to a group of women the other day, and I asked, they were talking about their housekeepers. They're wealthy women. And I said, does she have children? And they all looked at each other. They're like, I don't know. Somebody has been cleaning your house for 12 years and you don't know if she has children? It's just bizarre to me. Like, let's exhibit some real concern for the people that are around us and the people in our own communities. And let's remove some of the judgment and just be a source of help. Just be a source of encouragement. Just be a source of support. What would that look like?
So you also write, and this is also linking to what you were saying about heroes and not wanting to be a hero, that history is written by the winners. So what do you think of the saying, don't meet your heroes? Because now we know that everyone is flawed, even our heroes. And do you believe that? Or if you don't, can you tell us why?
I absolutely love meeting a flawed hero because it reminds me I don't have to be perfect. I think one of the biggest mistakes we've made is we have told people if they're not perfect, if you don't have a multi-billion-dollar company at the age of 22, what are you even doing with your life? Like we have cast millions of people as relative losers. Like if I'm not perfect, I can't do it. It's why we can't get people to run for office, right? We left with a bevy of sociopaths and narcissists Why? Because good, upstanding, moral people with great ideas are afraid to run. They're not perfect. They have this in their background, or they made a mistake over here, so they think they can't serve. Those are the people I want to serve because they have a humanity. They have an understanding of struggle and challenge. I think this mythology of perfection is strangling us. So I love nothing more than to meet somebody really famous and finding out, oh my gosh, they're totally regular.
And of course, they all are.
They all are. They're just people. They're just people. And the sooner we remember that, the sooner we'll tap into our own power.
Hmm. So let's see. One of the other concepts that I really resonated was be place changer. I think it goes in hand with the idea of not just being optimistic and inactive, but also just being positive and proactive. Because also in the beginning of the book, you say, "Oh, people think I'm too optimistic," but it's not just being optimistic; it's actually doing things.
Yep.
So, can you give an example of what being a place changer means in real life?
Yes. So in the book, I use the concept of the example of Tiger Woods. And here's a young man, biracial, Black and Asian, that, people forget Tiger Woods was forced to get dressed in the parking lot. There were country clubs that he could not play because of his race. And Tiger Woods is younger than me.
Yeah, that's
Right.
crazy.
And people can't believe that. And I'm like, this just to keep it in perspective, why we think the whole world has changed. It is not changing as fast as you think it has. Right. And it's really important. I was blown away to understand the Tiger Woods effect, and so you have a PGA tour and you have hundreds of people that play and they rank them. And the person at the bottom before Tiger, the person at the bottom would, make like, around $100,000, on the tour. And they've got to pay all their expenses out of that and everything. So they weren't getting wealthy because of golf. But after Tiger, the bottom ranked player made close to $1 million. And it was because Tiger brought more eyeballs. He brought more television deals. He brought more sponsorships to the whole sport. Like he didn't just come into the space. He changed the place. Right. And I think that's really, it's beautiful. I think that we can be inclusive sometimes if we let one woman onto the board, or we let one, person of color into the leadership team, but they don't really change the place. Everything stays the same. If you can come in here, if you just act like us, walk like us, talk like us, be like us, and we'll let you sit. You can sit with us if you do that. But there's something special about environments that allow the place to be changed, right?
So,
Where
what do you think?
everyone gets better.
What do you think? Do you think it was intentional that he changed the place, or is it just because he was so good and then sponsors came?
I think it's because he was so good. He brought his gifts to the space and it was exploded because of it. And that to me is what all DEI is. Let people bring their gifts to the space and it's going to benefit everyone. I have a recurring nightmare that the cure for cancer has already been born, but it was born in the wrong neighborhood. And that's why we don't have it. Right? We can't afford to waste human genius, human giftedness. And so here's this example. What if Tiger had gotten discouraged because he was being ostracized and left out and humiliated, really made to change in the parking lot? What if he had been discouraged by that? Not only would his life have been changed forever, all of these people, the whole sport was changed by his presence. I say we need more place changers and we need to be leaders that allow the place to be changed. And
And
that is hard.
what do you think it takes? What are some of the qualities to be a place changer? Because it's hard. It takes courage and strength.
It does. I think, it's why I tell people stop banning books and start reading them. Right? I think we have so many incredible stories of people who did amazing things and it required tenacity. I was reading about the Alabama bus boycott the other day. And here's this bus boycott Black people said, if we're going to ride the bus, we should be able to sit any place on the bus. It was following, Rosa Parks' arrest, and like, this is ridiculous. And they went on strike, right? And I don't know why, in my mind, again, broken stories, in my mind, I thought it was like a couple weeks. And I went back and I reread the story. Jonathan, it was over a year.
Really?
These people did not have cushy office jobs like me and you. They weren't moving paper from one side of a desk to the other side of a desk. They were doing physically grueling, difficult jobs. They were in Alabama heat. Think about that. Walking to and from work, exhausted. They did it for over a year. We get discouraged after 3 days. Our attention span is a week tops. We can't list the big news story from 3 weeks ago, right? So I think there's a tenacity that you have to develop to be a place changer. The patience. When John F. Kennedy tells the country that we're going to go to the moon, I imagine the scientists at NASA saying, we don't know how to get to the moon. They had no idea how to do it. It took them 7 years to do it, to figure it out. What if they had given up at year 2, at year 4, right? Like we have to be tenacious around our goals to allow the places to change.
As you said, not packing lunch, right?
Gotta pack a lunch, gird your loins, get yourself together.
What can you tell us about the concept of swapping the nouns, which I also found quite useful?
Oh, I'm so glad. It is the tool that I use more than any other tool. Any other tool. Whenever I'm confused about something or I'm unsure if it's the right thing to do, I just swap the nouns. Like, would I feel, like, for example, I remember when in the United States, there was a story of Ahmaud Arbery, who was basically shot and killed in the street because he was jogging in the street, and 2 white men, Ahmaud is Black, 2 white men thought he was suspicious. So they literally shot him in the street. And the story was covered up. He laid in the street for hours before his body was moved. And then the story was covered up. It took investigative journalism for it to come out. It came out months later. And I was talking to somebody about this, and I said, can you imagine a universe where a blonde 19-year-old young woman was jogging, was shot in the street by 2 Black men in a pickup truck, and that her body would stay on the street for 3 to 5 hours? Can you imagine that? And everybody was like, no, I can't imagine. It would just be unacceptable. If it's unacceptable for her, it's unacceptable for him. And that device always helps me if I'm about to say something or I'm trying to think how I would feel in that situation. I always try to swap the nouns and see if my emotion about something would feel the same if I made it a different gender or a different race or a different religious group. My husband he did a great example of this. He had a Muslim employee, and found him he was in his car with his eyes closed, and my husband's like, he came back from a meeting, he's like, what are you doing? He thought he was sleeping in the car. He's not sleeping in the car. He was praying, and he didn't want to pray in the office because people are Islamophobic, and he didn't want to disrupt or interrupt anybody. And then my husband walked upstairs, and he saw all the Christmas trees. And to think, he walked upstairs and saw his office all decked out for Christmas. And it's like, how would you feel if all of this was decorated for Ramadan, or all of this was decorated? We can't even imagine it. So if you can make room for Christmas, you can make room for him to pray, right? It's a simple device, but it just helps you to tap into everyone's humanity.
Yeah, would that be like the first advice you would give someone who wants to get into this state of mind? Because it's a lot, it's a lot. If we try to summarize, it's asking for help, letting go of stories, putting ourselves in other people's shoes as much as possible. So it can seem very daunting. What would be the first thing you would tell someone who wants to get better at all this?
I think the very first step is to sit with yourself. What do you believe? What does a leader look like? When I say the word captain, what picture comes in your head, right? What do you think? Can you be a CEO and be a mom? Do you really think it's a meritocracy? You really think the best person always gets the job? What do you think? I think it really starts with getting really honest. I call it a shadow belief. What are these beliefs that drive your, because they animate you, whether you name them or not, they're animating how you move through the world, right? And a good example of this, I have a friend who's trying to find a husband, and she says things all the time like, all men are dogs. Everyone cheats. It's just hopeless. There's no good men out here. And I had to stop her one day and say, if you believe all that, why do you want to get married? Well, and she's stuttering. And I said, do you see how your beliefs are driving your behavior? They animate how you move through the world and how patient you are and how understanding or flexible you are. Like, do you see that? We all have that. We all have beliefs that are animating us and keeping us from doing what, the quote unquote right thing is to do. And I think the work starts with just looking at yourself and leaning into what you really believe.
Okay, I'd like to end with one of the cornerstones of being indivisible, which is being compassionate. So not only to others, but also to yourself.
Yeah.
So would you say there's a fragile balance to be found between being compassionate towards others, questioning our beliefs, speaking up when needed, and also being compassionate to ourselves? And how do you manage this on a daily basis?
Yeah, I believe we're all on a journey. Like nobody's there. I think of inclusion as being on a scale from 1 to 10. And everybody thinks they're a 9. And the truth is, there's way more people down at the 2 to 4 end of the spectrum than they'd like to admit. But I think that if you meet somebody that is at the 2 or the 3 or the 4, they'll never get to 6 if we don't let them grow. I don't want to ever be someone's cage, and I don't want to be my own cage. I'm free to grow and evolve and develop. So wherever you are today is just the beginning, right? And I think if we just honor the fact that people are at different stages of their journey, including yourself, and just commit to the growth and the learning, everything works out.
Okay, amazing. Well, thank you so much. I think that's all the time we have. But thanks, Denise. This was really, really interesting. I encourage everyone to read your book, Indivisible, and it will be available February the 6th. So tomorrow, actually. Everywhere books are sold. I'm sure you're excited.
I'm so excited. Thank you so much. I don't think there's any greater gift than the gift of your attention. So thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. This was Blood Flow. See you soon.